Chapter 4. The Second Mind. Silas watched his breath rise above his view in the cool, crisp morning air. He breathed softly, nervously, in anticipation for the grand journey in front of him. He, Samara, and Torin sat at the doorstep of Uthrin's house, waiting in silence for him and Geode to finish discussing their plans. Silas yawned, his eyes still feeling heavy from rising at such an early hour. Little bits of orange and yellow from the oncoming sunrise were just starting to creep above the horizon. Torin yawned and stretched his arms. "Nervous?" he said as he finished his stretch. Silas nodded. "Aren't you?" Torin shrugged. "Yeah, I guess I am. I'm really more excited, though. If we're heading to Gelendor, it's going to be awesome. My dad was telling me a bit about it last night. It sounded incredible." Silas smiled, his spirits slightly lifted. "I guess I'm just nervous about all the other things. Learning to fight, use magic, all that. At least you and Samara have a bit of a head start. She's already started trying to use magic, and you've known how to fight ever since you were little. I don't have anything." Samara scooted herself closer to Silas, grabbing his hand with her own. "Don't worry, we'll help each other out. Plus, we have Uthrin and Geode to help us. I think we're going to find out what we're really made of, and it's going to surprise us all." Silas looked into Samara's beautiful emerald green eyes. She smiled at him, nearly melting his heart. Her smile and face radiated perfection. Silas truly believed that he had never seen anyone more beautiful in his life. Her perfect complexion and proportions begged his inner feelings to be released. He could have kissed her at that very moment. He desired it more than anything, to feel her lips against his. "Are you kids ready?" Uthrin's quiet, deep voice said behind him. Silas jumped and let go of Samara's hand, spinning around to meet Uthrin's gaze. "Don't sneak up on us like that!" He felt his cheeks blushing and didn't know whether it came from the embarrassment of being startled or that he was just 1 ounce of courage away from kissing Samara smack on the lips. "It's a good thing I didn't get too brave," he thought to himself, "or I probably would have gotten a smack, and not on the lips either." "Well," Uthrin continued, unfazed by Silas's words, "do you have everything you will need for our travels? Remember, it will take us several weeks to make the journey to Gelendor. You will need to be prepared to survive in the wilderness. We will have to hunt and gather our own food, find our own water, and live with only what we can carry on our backs." Silas thought again about the items he had packed and the advice that his father had given him. "Remember, Silas, trust your instincts. When you are faced with tough decisions, be sure to trust your mind and your heart. There are many dangerous things in this world, and plenty of evil. But if you keep your heart and mind focused on what's right, darkness won't be able to overpower you." Nodding, Silas responded back to Uthrin. "Yeah, I think I'm all set." "We are too," Samara added. "Good," Uthrin said, giving a quick nod. "Then we should be off. If Geode is correct, we will have but a very short window to make our escape without being noticed. We've decided it's too risky to teleport using light magic. Somehow, against all reason, the both of us have an uneasy feeling that whispers of our plans have already spread. We have to leave now, as quickly and stealthily as possible. Onward, to the east gate, and by the light, try to remain unseen." Silas followed Uthrin, Geode, and the others as they walked towards the east side of town. The warnings of Uthrin in his strange, almost holy way of talking repeating in his mind as they walked in between buildings, ducked behind carts and stacks of hay, and tiptoed through the shadows of the early morning to avoid the view of any patrolling guard. "Does it feel like there are more guards than usual this morning?" Torin whispered to Silas as they were crouched behind an old horse barn. "I've never seen it like this before, even when I've had to get up this early for chores. Do you think that somehow Malus could know what we're up to?" "We'll have to hope that's not the case, Torin," Uthrin whispered, intercepting his conversation. "I agree, though. Something is not right. Malus was in possession of the Stone of Darkness for several years. It could be that he has some connection with the stone that is telling him it is no longer in its hiding place." "It's almost certain that he knows," another deep voice added. Silas turned his head to look at the extremely muscular, intimidating man. His dark black hair and a long scar across his right cheek added to his intimidation level. "From what I know about darkness magic, there are several ways that Malos could be directly connected to the stone. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he were the one that directly ordered Ericorn to hide it in the crypt for who knows what purpose. Now that it is no longer there, he can probably feel its absence. Silas watched one of the guards patrolling directly in their path of escape wave his hand, beckoning a second guard to approach and start a conversation. Is the Stone of Darkness evil, then? It's complicated, Uthrin sighed. While not inherently evil, it has the tendency to bring out the worst in people. As you will learn, some elements are more naturally attuned towards evil, good, or other emotions than others. Light naturally wants to do things that are good and holy, commanding justice in all things. Darkness, on the other hand, especially in the hands of someone with already not so good intentions, tends to bring out evil and corrupt desires. It doesn't mean that all practitioners of darkness magic are inherently evil, but it's much easier to sway in that direction when using darkness than any other element. The group sat in silence for a moment, then watched as a pair of guards left their post and began walking towards one of the market buildings. It wasn't an uncommon sight. They were most likely wanting to force the poor owner into selling them something for far less than it was worth. With the morning drawing near, people would start opening their shops soon. Now, we must go now, or I fear our window of opportunity will be too short at the gate, Geode whispered to the group, cautiously walking towards where the guards had been standing. They made their way quietly and carefully through the streets. Each step through the once small yet great trading kingdom brought additional questions to Silas's mind. Geode gave a signal, then quickly ran behind a building near the east gate where the two guards stood at the ready. What's this window of opportunity that Geode keeps bringing up? Silas whispered as he stepped behind Uthrin. You have much to learn still, Silas, Uthrin responded. We'll teach you more as soon as we're out of Shilvers and into the wilderness. Suffice it for now, I'll tell you that Geode is an exceptionally talented nature mage, and possesses advanced knowledge of divination because of it. Divination? Samara said, an edge of confusion in her voice. Yes, Uthrin continued. The ability to both transmogrify simple objects, as well as see tiny glimpses into the near future. The future? Samara asked, her jaw dropping. So, what did he... Uthrin, we must go now, Geode's deep voice cut in. Hurry, Uthrin quickly replied. Stay close behind me. Uthrin dashed out from behind the horse barn with a speed that defied his age. Silas ran with the others towards an old run-down building near the east gate. Sliding behind the slightly crumbling walls of the building, Silas risked a peek around the corner. One lone guard stood at the ready near the gate. Most of the town gates were large and had several guards near them, as well as a small building where the guards could relieve themselves, sleep, or do other mundane tasks. Several of the gates were smaller, however, and were installed in places where the town walls had been broken down during the time when Malos made his attack. These gates still had the small building next to them, but usually only had one guard on post. Large lanterns hung on either side of the gate, swaying gently in the wind. Silas pondered what the window of opportunity that Geode was talking about might be, when a sudden movement from the guard caught his attention. The guard bent over slightly, putting one hand on his stomach and used the other to wipe sweat from his brow. He bent over, putting both of his hands on his knees, and began breathing deeply. After a minute or so, the guard began looking around to see if anyone was watching. Seeing no one, he grabbed one of the lanterns from the gate and ran into the small building, slamming the door behind him. Now! Geode said to the group and began to sprint towards the gate. Slightly startled, Silas saw Samara, Torin, and Uthrin run past him. Collecting himself, Silas joined the race for the gate, still bewildered on how Geode could have possibly known that the guard was going to retreat to his little building at that exact moment. Geode reached the gate first. Upon arriving, he slowed himself to a stop and began fiddling with the chain that was wrapped around the two doors of the gate. Trying to avoid the loud clanking of metal on metal as he unwrapped the chain, he carefully pulled the gate open. It made a loud creak as he swung the gate open and motioned with his hands for everyone to run through. As Silas approached the gate, he turned to look at the guardhouse and saw through one of the windows the dim glow of the lantern the guard had taken. He turned back towards the gate and slipped through past Geode. Geode then walked through and closed the gate behind him, wrapping the chain around the gate as it had been before, then motioned for the group to continue without him. Keep going. I'll catch up. Silas followed Uthrin, Samara, and Torin as they ran towards a small group of trees. Silas felt the crunch of dry fallen leaves under his feet as he entered the grove. They waited in silence, breathing their worry into the air while they waited for Geode to join them. Silas looked towards the gate. It was too dark to tell, but he didn't think he saw the shadow of the guard yet. just the bouncing lights of the one lantern that remained. A rustle of leaves caused his heart to jump, but relief quickly washed over him as he saw Geode enter the grove.
"Well done, everyone. I think we were able to get through without him noticing us,"
Uthrin said in a relieved tone. "Why did he all of a sudden run into that guardhouse?" Samara asked, breathing heavy from the run and the adrenaline of escape.
"It looked like he was about to puke,"
Torin added in, not nearly as winded as the rest of them seemed.
"That's precisely what he was doing," Geode responded. "Last night, I sent one of the merchants that was headed home with some sweets that were, let's just say, not too delightful. I gave him the instruction to make sure that the guard at this gate got one of them as a gift."
Geode winked, a charming, devious smile upon his warrior face. Silas instantly grew a liking for Geode, a smile spreading across his own face at the prank that had allowed them to escape.
"So, you were able to use divination to know exactly when it would get to his stomach and when he would be sick enough to have to leave his post?" Samara asked.
"More or less, yes. There's a bit more to it than that, but it's a different story for a different day. For now, we need to get moving. I don't think we were seen, but it's better to be safe than sorry. If someone did see us leaving, we need to put some distance between us."
"Keep each other safe," Uthrin added. "If we run into any danger, be sure to stick together. Don't hesitate to leave Geode or me behind. You mustn't engage in anything until we've been able to train you. I know that you are already quite good at fighting, Torin, and I expect you to use that knowledge to protect your friends if they fall into any danger. Is that understood? Keep them safe. That's your #1 priority."
Torin nodded. "I understand. I'll keep them safe." His tone was much more mature than Silas was used to hearing.
"Good," Uthrin continued. "Let's be off then. We will head east until we reach the mouth of the river. We can make camp there tonight."
The sun began to peek up over the mountains to the east, spreading a warm orange glow over Silas. The birds were out now, singing their songs and beginning their searches for food. Thoughts of learning magic and of a mysterious city called Gelendor swirled amongst his thoughts, along with a growling stomach. "Uthrin," Silas finally started, "why exactly are we headed for Gelendor? Is there another elemental stone of power there?"
Uthrin slowed his pace just slightly. "My apologies. I haven't explained myself very well to you all yet. My mind has been deep in thoughts about the reasoning behind all the guards back in Shilverst, and I tend to allow myself to jump to conclusions. In answer to your question, we're headed to Gelendor because there are currently many nature mages that live there who we believe will be able to help us find some clues as to the whereabouts of the Stone of Nature. Geode used to live there and believes that they will be willing to help."
Samara increased her pace to put herself next to Silas. "Uthrin, I guess I still don't quite understand something. If the Stone of Darkness is so powerful and the amulet is literally the key to the Vault of Kings, why would Malos have hidden it back in the ancient crypt?"
Uthrin frowned. "That's something I have been puzzling over for a while now. It's a very troubling question. If he knew where the amulet to the Vault of Kings was hidden, there is no way he would have ever let it out of his sight. I am wondering if perhaps Arakorn was the one who had discovered the amulet and for some reason never told Malos. Perhaps he had thoughts of betrayal and was not able to act on them before the Council of Light ended him. It's a mystery that I have not yet solved."
"What do the stones do exactly?" Silas asked.
"The stones are an additional means of power for the person who wields them,"
Uthrin said, resuming his previous pace.
"When opening the second mind and connecting your will with the elements, the stones provide the user with additional strength and focus, as well as more persuasion to bend the will of the elements towards what you desire. They are also essential for the amulet to work as the key to the Vault of Kings, as I had mentioned before."
"Second mind?" Silas said in a confused tone.
Uthrin sighed. "There's so much to explain. I believe we've been making good time thus far. Let's stop and rest for a moment, and we can eat, and I can clarify a few things."
The group came to a stop in a group of trees not far from the road. Finding a fallen tree, Silas, Torin, and Samara sat down on the slightly rotting trunk. Geode sat on a nearby rock and pulled out some bread from his pack. Silas eagerly tore into his rations as Uthrin stood in front of the fallen tree and talked.
"There are 4 basic steps when it comes to channeling the ancient art of magic. The first step is to make the correct hand symbol to initiate the type of element that you are using. There are 6 different symbols, 1 for each element. The element of light, which is the one that I'm most familiar with, has a symbol that's made like so.
Uthran put his hands out in front of him and made the symbol of light. He held his hands out so the others could see as he explained.
With the palms facing outward, the thumbs and pointer fingers are connected, making a heart symbol. Next, the middle fingers are brought upward and touch, creating a diamond above the heart. The ring and pinky fingers align with the middle finger. Once that symbol has been made, the next step is to tap into what is called the inner life. Everything has an inner life. All the objects around us are filled with it. The birds you hear, the worms under your feet, the logs that you sit upon, even the air that you breathe. Inner life is what connects us all. It is the foundation of all things. For us, our inner life is found within the stomach.
Uthran broke the symbol he was making with his hands and put his right hand over his stomach.
This is the basin to your inner life. It needs to be brought forth, out of the stomach and into the hands to be used.
He resumed the symbol that he had made with his hands before and continued.
After you make the symbol, focus your mind upon this basin. Once you have found its spark, the third step is to bring your inner life from your stomach up through your torso, into your chest, down your arms, and into your hands.
Just as Uthran finished speaking, his hands began to glow. A bright yellow light filled the symbols of the heart and the diamond shapes that his fingers made, then spread to cover the entirety of his hands until just above the wrist. Silas looked in awe and wonder at the light display. It was beautiful, giving off a warm glow and emanating an energy that made Silas feel that the light was almost alive. The soft glow continued radiating from Uthran's hands as he continued to explain.
The final step is the most difficult of the four. After moving your inner life into your hands and creating the elemental glow, you need to open what is called the second mind.
Uthran again released the energy from his hands and elaborated.
The second mind is an extension of yourself. It allows you to be connected to the energies of everything around you. Think of your conscious self as your first mind, the thoughts that you are having right now, the desires that occupy your heart, your inner thoughts and workings. They are all a part of your first mind. Once you connect your first mind to the inner life of the energy that surrounds you, your very soul is lifted from your body and connected to these elemental powers. A completely new body is created from your soul. This new body is called the second mind. It is half you, and half the element to which you are connected, coexisting in balance and harmony.
Torin rubbed the sides of his head with his fingers. Okay, I'm super confused right now. So, you're saying that you can have two separate bodies, or minds, or whatever at the same time? Does that mean that I would be able to think about two different things at once?
I wish I had a better way to explain it, but you don't truly come to understand the feeling until you have experienced it. It's as though your body and your soul become separate, but you are still in control of the actions of both. And your soul, or second mind, is heavily influenced by the element you are connected with.
Torin folded his arms. That seems complicated.
Indeed. That's why it's the hardest step for beginners to learn. After you open your second mind for the first time, you will know what it feels like and be able to do it again, with more and more ease, until it's second nature.
Uthran again made the symbol of light with his hands, and they began to glow. Taking in a breath, Uthran's eyes started to glow the same color as his hands. Silas could no longer see the blue coloring that was once centered in his eyes, only a radiating yellow light. It was somewhat frightening, seeing someone's eyes glowing so unnaturally. It reminded him of his memory of Melos and his glowing eyes, and made the hairs on his arms stand up.
I am now connected to my second mind, Uthran continued. At this stage, the only thing left to do is to bring into unison the desires of your first mind and your second mind, so that they align. Once that happens, the magic will take effect.
Uthran broke the symbol that he was making with his hands and held his hand out towards Silas. An orb of light magic appeared in his hand and floated just above his outstretched palm. It radiated with power, a slight hum buzzing around its edges. The powerful ball of light pulsated as Uthran continued.
As I said before, your second mind is only half you, and half the element you are channeling. Sometimes it is difficult to get your desires to align because of that. Each element has unique, natural desires of things that it would like to accomplish. For example, the light wants to heal, protect, and bring justice upon what it deems as wicked. If I were to try to command it to burn down a tree in front of me, I would have a really hard time persuading my second mind to come to that desire. There is a little bit of persuading that can happen, but ultimately, the light will only deviate so far. Part of knowing how to use magic is knowing the natural desires of each element, and how to use them appropriately. A true master knows where the limits of the element lie, for you cannot control the elements and force them to do things that they do not naturally desire to do.
How do you know what the elements naturally desire to do? Samara asked.
When you have opened your second mind, you will feel those desires. They will literally become a part of you.
Uthrin allowed the ball of light to fade into the air, then held up one finger.
One part you, knowing what you desire.
He held up another finger on his opposite hand.
The other part the element, telling you what it's willing to let you do.
He put his fingers together, wrapping them as one.
Coming together, in unison, allowing your combined wills to be done. The more time you spend with your second mind opened, the more you will discover both about the elements and about yourself. The more time you spend with the elements, the more that they will truly become a part of who you are.
Uthrin looked at Samara, then over to Torin, and finally Silas.
After you have learned to open your second mind and cast your first light spell, maybe we can ask a geode to teach you some nature magic. But for now, we had better be on the move again. I would like to get to the river before nightfall.
The light from Uthrin's hands and eyes faded as he closed his connection to the light. Silas, Torin, and Samara finished eating what they could, then put the rest away in their bags. Tossing his bag on his shoulder, Silas made a silent vow to himself. I'm going to learn how to open my second mind and become a great mage, no matter what it takes. The group returned to the road and continued their way eastward toward the river. Silas was grateful for the cooler weather of the season. He imagined that it would have been quite hot and miserable to do all this walking, with all the gear that he had in his pack, in the middle of the summer. He shifted the weight of his pack on his shoulders as he walked, his mind reflecting on the items that his father had helped him pack. A small hunting bow with several arrows, a knife, some extra clothes, rope, flint, a small hatchet, gear to pitch a small tent, blankets to sleep with, and a short sword he had used while in the King's Guard, as well as a couple days' worth of rations. Uthrin announced after several miles that their path would deviate from the main road to help avoid the chances of running into trouble. They walked through the grassy hills and trees for the rest of the afternoon, occasionally asking a question to Uthrin or Geode, or reminiscing childhood memories between Silas, Torin, and Samara. The sounds of rushing water over rocks finally reached their ears, and a short distance later, the sight of the river came into view.
We'll make camp here, Uthrin announced. When you're finished setting up for tonight, meet me by the riverbank. We'll begin your training tonight.
Excited to start his training, Silas looked around for the best place to set up his sleeping arrangements. Where do you think we should sleep? He asked Samara. Samara got a slightly disgusted look on her face. What do you mean where we should sleep? I'm sleeping somewhere where I can get some privacy, away from you two, so don't even think about setting up anywhere near me. Silas's face turned bright red. No, that's not what I meant to say was... Torin laughed, a loud, hearty laugh, and patted him on the back. Come on, Silas. Let's go find a spot over by the river and leave the princess to find her own spot where we can't spy on her. At least, not without her noticing. He looked at Samara with a devious look and raised his eyebrows several times. Torin, I swear, if I catch you spying on me or coming over and trying to scare me in the night, you won't live to see Gellandor. Torin laughed again, his face growing sly. He then turned towards Silas and spoke in a whisper just loud enough for her to hear. She said, if we get caught. Samara dropped her bag and stomped over to Torin. Ah! Help! He yelled and began to jog away from her. She chased him as he ran away laughing. A smile crept up Silas's mouth, his heart grateful for moments like these that took away from the ever-growing stress. Samara finally gave up the chase and returned to her bag. She picked it up and pointed a finger at Silas's chest. I mean it. Far away. You got it? Without waiting for a response, Samara set off to find a private place to set up her tent. He and Torin picked a perfect place, right on a sandbar near the river. They pitched their tents and got everything set, then looked for Uthrin. They found him sitting on a small, grassy area near the large body of water that connected the northern sea to the river, which would narrow as they continued south. As Silas and Torin approached him, Uthrin motioned for them to sit down. They sat next to each other on the grass and awaited further instructions. Their respect for the old man had grown substantially after seeing what he could do and hearing him talk about magic. He was much more powerful and wise than either of them could have ever thought possible.
"First, we will have both of you try to tap into your inner life," he began. "As soon as we get to that point, we'll move on to opening the second mind. But first, we need to understand the very basics. Both of you make the symbol of light as I showed you before."
Torrin and Silas looked at each other, then both tried to replicate the symbol of light with their hands.
"Not quite," Uthrin said, examining their hands. "Torrin, you need to make sure that the last 3 fingers on your hands are all aligned with each other. And Silas, you need to bend your pointer fingers more so that you make a heart, not a circle."
Trying again, the boys adjusted their hands until Uthrin was satisfied.
"Excellent. Now commit this symbol to memory. Before you are to begin using light magic, you must first initiate this symbol. Once you have opened your second mind, you can break the symbol and won't have to use it again until you either change elements or close your second mind and need to reopen it again. You must also learn to make these symbols quickly. If you are ever in trouble and need to quickly cast a spell, you don't want to be stumbling with your hands while someone is trying to kill you. Next, I want you both to focus your minds upon your stomachs and search for the sensation of your inner life. It will be small and somewhat difficult to find at first. When you are first learning, I find it easier to actually start by listening to your heart. Close your eyes and focus on your heartbeat."
Silas and Torrin closed their eyes. Silas focused on his heartbeat. At first, he couldn't feel anything at all, but as he sat and listened, he could start to feel the steady rhythm of his heart.
Once you have focused on your heart, which is what gives life to your body, change that focus and move it down, deep within your stomach. You won't be able to feel a physical beat like you do with your heart, but you will be able to feel a slight tingle. Your pools of inner life will be small right now, but will grow over time as you become more and more powerful.
Silas mentally moved his focus from his beating heart downwards until it rested upon his stomach. He focused on his breathing, the slow inward and outward movement of his diaphragm, and then moved it deeper. He didn't feel anything for what seemed like a long time, but was determined to see results. He blocked out all the surrounding noise, from the river water running gently past them, to the birds softly chirping in the trees, to the breeze gently brushing against his ears. He felt as if he had removed himself from the world and entered his own domain of peace. It feels good to block out the world, he thought to himself. Just then, he felt an extremely faint but nevertheless present tingle deep within his stomach. He redoubled his focus, letting the sensation grow within himself. The tingle seemed alive, almost shy, hiding itself deep within its secure domain. He found himself almost coaxing the little feeling to come out, assuring it that it was safe. The tingle gained in strength and began to spread until it no longer felt shy, but curious. It grew and grew until Silas felt his entire torso tingling. "I think I've got it," he said softly, opening his eyes. The feeling of peace and inner security continued to flow through him, granting him confidence and happiness. He had never felt so good in his entire life. "This is incredible!"
"Very good, Silas. Now, move your inner life from your stomach through your arms and into your hands."
Silas closed his eyes again and focused on the sensation. It felt so good, so welcoming. It felt as if a part of his very being had just been awakened from a dormant state. He moved the sensation from his torso to fill his arms and then down into his hands. Keeping his eyes closed, he felt his hands start to tingle with the same sensation, but this time with an added warmth. It felt as if he were holding a small rabbit in his hands, or something else that was alive and giving more heat than his normal body would produce on its own.
"Well done," Uthrin said. "Very well done."
Silas opened his eyes to see his hands glowing with the bright yellow color of light magic. The light warmed his hands and strengthened his confidence. Turning his head towards Torrin to view his progress, he saw Torrin still sitting with his eyes closed tightly. He seemed to be struggling with no outward sign of success. He could see sweat forming on Torrin's forehead, the veins on his neck bulging under the strain. He was just about to offer some words of encouragement when he was interrupted by Uthrin.
"Maintain your focus, Silas. You're not done yet. The next part is the most difficult in the process. You must now focus the energy from your hands. back up into your arms and into your head. As it enters your head, you will feel a very specific sensation. The feeling is different for everyone, but you should know it when you feel it. Allow that feeling to take over you, then allow your consciousness to be released. That part will almost feel like you are allowing your soul to leave your body, as if you were dying. Don't be alarmed. You won't die. You will just allow part of your life energy to exit and form the connection to your second mind.
Silas looked at his hands again, his confidence bolstered at his early success. I can do this. He then closed his eyes and focused on the energy in his hands. He felt the energy, still alive, still as welcoming as ever. He willed the energy to move from its current position back up his arms. The warmth crawled ever so slowly into his arms and up into his shoulders, the tingling sensation ever present. It continued to rise until it entered his neck and then up into his head. Once it entered his head, his entire body started to pulsate with energy. He could feel every inch of his body all in unison. He felt the blood pumping through his veins, the air entering and exiting his lungs. He was aware of every muscle, every ligament, every cell in his body. He felt in complete control of his very being, as if he could simply tell his heart to stop beating and it would obey. A warm, almost burning sensation came from his pocket where the amulet was concealed as well, as if it knew that he was attempting to use the ancient power of magic. This must be the feeling, he thought, then felt a tingle run up his spine as if his body were affirming the thought. Focusing on the energy that now coursed through his body, he let out a breath of air and imagined his soul leaving his body. A part of his soul seemed to raise up above his mortal capsule, and then stopped. Darkness flooded into his body, invading his mind. Despair and fear entered and overtook every other feeling. What was once light and warmth and peace suddenly became darkness, cold, and destruction. He willed the feeling to go away, but it denied his pleas. Terror overcame him. He tried to release the energy and break the symbol that he was making with his hands, but the darkness seemed to grab hold of his muscles, weaving their way into his bones and ligaments, forcing its dark will upon him. He felt himself fall onto his back. He opened his eyes but saw nothing, only darkness. He tried to scream, calling out for help from Uthrin and Torin, but only a cold wheeze came out. He felt as if his body was going to be decimated, reduced to a cold, dark ruin. Just when he felt as if all hope was lost, that he was banished to a dark realm, several images flashed in front of him, which he immediately recognized from when he was in the ancient crypt. He saw an illuminated tree, standing on the top of a hill. A stream appeared next to the tree, slowly trickling water towards it before fading off into the nothingness in the darkness. Birds were chirping and landing on the lower branches of the tree, picking at bright white fruit that was scattered about its branches. Something flashed to his left, then darkness consumed the tree. The scene in front of him changed to a great fire burning in the darkness. The flames were dark purple, almost black, consuming everything in their wake. Buildings and people that Silas didn't recognize were being destroyed by the dark heat that it emitted. He ran away from the flames in search of his home and family, but the dark fire immediately surrounded him, sending an indescribable pain coursing through his body. He fell to his knees in agony and confusion, seemingly sentenced to an immediate doom. An echoing, evil laugh caused him to again jump to his feet and spin around. Standing in front of him was the dark mage Melos. He wore black robes and a hood that covered his head and face. All that Silas could see were his dark, glowing purple eyes through the shadows of his hood. Melos laughed again, sending terror flooding through his body. He collapsed in fear and wrapped his arms around his head. The flames of the dark fire and the cruel, mocking laughter of evil incarnate tormented his soul. Just as he felt he would be consumed by all the things surrounding him, everything fell silent. He opened his eyes to see that the flames had disappeared, along with Melos and the destruction of the city. A giant wooden door stood in front of him. It appeared to be about 15 feet tall and around 8 feet wide. The wood was dark brown and had metal rivets throughout, holding the wooden pallets together. 2 large metal hinges hung on the sides of the door, connecting to large metal plates that curved towards the center of the door in an intricate pattern. The top of the door was rounded, and 6 brightly colored gems of different colors were inlaid into a metal bracket at the top. Where Silas expected a door handle to be, there was an indented hole about the size of the amulet that he had found. Silas approached the door, cautiously reaching his hand out and touching the wood. Just as he felt the wood, the vision ended, and he found himself back on the riverbank lying on the ground. Pain coursed through his body as he lay there, struggling to get a breath of air to enter his lungs.
Silas, are you all right?
Uthrin said, kneeling beside him. He had one hand upon Silas's chest and a look of concern on his face.
What happened? You were doing so well. Then you suddenly looked to be having a seizure or something. Are you okay?
Pain continued to pulse through his body, though it was starting to subside. He sat up, terrifying images continuing to pass through his mind like a remembrance of a nightmare. I have no idea. I was just trying to open my second mind, but right when I thought I had it, I started seeing things again. Uthrin raised an eyebrow.
Seeing things again? Like another vision? Were they the same things you saw the first time?
I think so, Silas responded, holding his head. No, this time I only saw small pieces, just more vividly a couple of pieces of what I saw the first time. What was it? Torrin asked, an obvious concern for his friend in his voice. Silas explained the vision to Uthrin and Torrin, describing the tree, birds, and stream as best as he could. He then moved on to the fire and destruction of what he assumed to be Shilverst, as well as his encounter with Melos. Finally, he recounted his view of the giant door. What could all of this mean, Uthrin? Silas asked after he had finished. Do you think any of it is going to come true? Is Shilverst going to be destroyed? Uthrin sat and pondered for a moment before speaking.
I'm not sure, to be honest. In your vision, Melos was looking at you? You felt like he saw you.
Maybe, Silas said, rubbing the side of his head. I don't know. What if it is true? Torrin exclaimed. What if Silas just used divination like Geode and saw the future? What if Shilverst really is going to be destroyed? We have to stop it, or at least warn them that something could happen. Uthrin put a hand on his chin.
I don't think we have to worry about Shilverst. At least, not yet. I do think it would be a good idea to at least warn them, though. Perhaps send a message to Thren and have him tell the others to keep an eye out. We can have Geode return to Shilverst and deliver the message. We'll wait for him here. I truly believe that the sooner we make it to Gelendor, the better. We can't risk Melos or his henchmen finding us alone in the woods.
Uthrin, Silas said, his mind unable to focus on Uthrin's words. Was the door that I saw, was that the Vault of Kings?
It's a good guess, Uthrin responded. I don't know what else it could be. As far as I know, only the original kings themselves have ever seen the door to the Vault of Kings. These visions you're having, they trouble me. I'll have to ponder them.
Why did they come back when I was trying to open my second mind?
It's hard to know. It could be that when you touched the stone in the crypt that you set off some kind of darkness spell that the Council of Light and I failed to detect. Perhaps some of that darkness remained within you at all this time. I know that darkness can be used to cause people to see things, to have nightmares, but this, I just can't be sure. I do wonder if there are any hidden messages within these visions that could help us in our quest. We'll have to keep a close eye on these visions whenever you have them. Perhaps we will be able to see more into what Arakorn and Melos were up to through them.
Silas opened his mouth but was cut off by the sight of Samara and Geode. What's everyone up to? Samara asked. Did you start training without me? Uthrin motioned for both Geode and Samara to sit in the grass, and then proceeded to tell them of the events that had just transpired. Silas added in details where necessary, and assured them both that he was all right. It can't be true. Shilverst wouldn't really be destroyed, right, Uthrin? Samara said fearfully. We have to do something. We can't just sit here if we know something bad is going to happen.
I was going to ask Geode if he would return to the town and warn Thren. He could then warn others, and they could keep watch.
Uthrin looked towards his comrade of many years.
What do you say, my friend? In the morning, would you return to the town and warn them of what Silas has seen and meet us back here?
Geode nodded.
I don't like it either. There isn't a reason I can think of that Melos would attack Shilverst again. But you never know with that madman. I'll move swiftly and give a report to Thren. I'll be back before you know it.
Thank you, my friend. As for the rest of you, I swore to protect you, and I vowed to myself that I would teach you how to protect yourselves if something ever happened to me. Get some rest. Tomorrow, Geode will head back for Shilverst, and we can continue our training.